Hello everyone, so we're gonna start a new series, and in this one we're just gonna look into how to make those crack textures or ground impacts, if you like. So whenever you have like a big projectile hitting the ground, you might want to have this animated decal, which I'm gonna show you in a second. And we're gonna start with this texture first. Okay, so I think it's a very simple in terms of graph in Substance Designer, and it's a nice texture to start with. The next one we'll create this, and as the last one I think this one, because it's a lot more complex. And in the meantime, if I'm gonna come up with any better way or better looking texture, then we're probably gonna expand this series and we're gonna make a few more parts, but for now we're gonna start with this texture. Okay, so let me show how it works in the engine. So as you can see, I've got a bunch of stuff going on here. I've got the character, I've got some trails and fires in the background. If you're curious what those are, feel free to watch the March channel update. As for the ground texture, let's just have a look. Okay, so this is the Patreon content, how to make this material and how to animate it in the blueprint, which I will be releasing in very soon. As for the texture, yeah, we're just gonna make this texture, and yeah, again, as I mentioned, I think it's one of the simplest one out of those three. So yeah, you might want to use for something like this. Okay. All right, so let me go to Photoshop now so I can walk you through the steps. We're gonna start with the Cells 2 node in Substance. I'm gonna get rid of some of the shapes, as you can see here, and use the slope blur. I'm gonna use even more slope blur here, and distort it a little bit, and get rid of random shapes from it. And in the end, we're just gonna add glow and some colors to it, just to have an idea how it might look in the engine. Okay. Right, so this will be creating in this video. So let's go into Substance Designer now. Okay, so I'm gonna start with Cells 2, because it comes with a nice preset. So basically I can tweak those settings like scale and edge width, invert it, and I got a really good base to start with. So next I'm gonna use slope blur, and I need the shape of this soft circle as well. In here I'm gonna change mode to max, ramp up the samples, and maybe intensity as well. So as you can see, we've got barely any effect in the center, and then it increases towards the edges, which is what we want. Okay, and I'm gonna blend it as well. Let me zoom in as well if you wanna just have a look what I'm doing. I'm gonna blend it with this soft circle on multiply. So as you can see, we've got like a really good starting base for this texture. So now the edges looks a little bit too uniform for me. So I'm just gonna get rid of some stuff from it. So I'm gonna blend it with, some pattern that we're gonna try to design now. So I'm gonna use shape, soft circle. I'm gonna scale it down, levels in case I need some additional control, and I'm gonna use warp with Perlin noise. For the intensity, I'm gonna start with 5, and now as you can see, we've got this area here which is like concentrated, and I don't want that. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna tweak our levels now, so we could get a lot more random pattern, something like this. And now maybe I'm gonna go down to Perlin noise and just reduce the scale, so we get something like this maybe. But I will increase the warp to maybe 8. Okay, so let's plug this in and set the blending mode to subtract. Okay, so we managed to get rid of a bunch of data from our main texture, but I think it's, you know, there's just too many details. So I'm just gonna scale down the Perlin noise to something like this maybe. Okay, scale of 14. If you know, using exactly the same values as I do. The only thing I would say now is just, you know, it doesn't fit together because we got those spots. So I like to do also, I'm just gonna run it through radial blur, and I'm gonna go with levels again. So as you can see, this is even a good start if you want to create like a ripple texture, but let's continue, you know, try to make this crack texture. Okay, so I'm going to use this instead, and I think this works a lot better, especially because this is, you know, circular shape. So having this with the radial blur, it makes a lot more sense to me. Okay, so let's maybe soften this a little bit using blur with a low value, maybe 1. I'm going to drag the quality to 1 as well. And I think it would be cool if we could maybe get rid of a little bit more data from that texture. So I'm going to use blend, and I'm going to continue with this pattern we've created here. So I'm going to use slope, shape again, soft circle, and as for the samples, I'm going to keep it low, something like 1 maybe, and increase the intensity to maybe 9. I'm going to see what I can achieve with different blending nodes, but not much, so I'm going to keep it to blur. And now I'm going to run it through levels, because obviously this is too much data, and I just want to have something like this. Okay, now I want to make it a little bit more irregular, so I'm going to use warp and Perlin noise for that. So that's a little bit too much, but that could work, but maybe let's reduce the Perlin scale. Okay. And now I think it's very, it's got those hard edges, and it's got too much white here. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna use distance node, and for that I need to invert it first, and then run it through distance, and then invert it back in. Okay, I actually use this node a lot when I want to create like a stylized shape. So as you can see, you can get some really nice shapes using that node. Okay, now I'm just gonna plug this in and change the blending mode to subtract. And now you can go to distance node and, you know, control this here. So I want to go with maybe 10. Okay, and I think this could work. So next thing is that I want to actually use slope blur, because in the previous slope we extended those edges outwards from the center, and I want to have them pointing inwards as well. Okay, so I'm just going to run it through slope. I'm going to use a soft circle shape again. Whoops. I'm going to ramp up my samples, and I'm going to use max. So let's run it using the same method as before, so outwards, and I'm going to copy paste this, change the intensity to B- value, and I'm going to blend this in with this slope. Okay, let's try this. So I think it could work, but maybe it's a little bit too intense, so I like to try other stuff as well. I think this is pretty cool. And I'm actually going to keep it for the highlights in case we need it, and I'm going to blend this one with another blend, because I still need to blend those two together. Whoops, so I'm gonna use maybe add linear, and try different things, even subtract, max lighten, min. I think add linear works best, so I'm just gonna plug this one in and this one add linear as well. And now basically we can reduce the glow, overall glow, and we can keep those highlights. Okay, so I'm gonna go with something like this. And I'm gonna use warp now as well. And I'm gonna use parallel noise. With some low intensity, because I just wanna warp some of the edges. So that's a little bit too much, so I'm gonna decrease the scale of the parallel noise. And get a little bit of the irregularities on the edges. Okay, I'm gonna warp it again, but this time I'm gonna use cells for node, but this needs to be blurred, and I'm gonna use this for the warp, for the gradient input. Okay, and obviously intensity is a bit too much, so I'm gonna maybe keep it to 0.5, and now I'm going to be reducing the blur gradually to get something that I want. So I think the scale of the cells is a bit too much as well, because I need maybe something like this, and now I can go back and start reducing the intensity. Okay, and we need to blur it a little bit. Yeah, so we're just trying to break some of the edges. Let's see if, okay, so that could work, but now we have to decrease the intensity of the warp. Okay, so we kind of destroying the edges and make them a lot more irregular, which is something that we want, I think. But obviously don't go overboard with this warp node, okay? Okay, so now maybe let's try to use gradient and let's try to colorize it and see if it actually, looks cool. So I'm gonna go for gradient, click anywhere here. I'm gonna go with the red color, maybe here, and orange, or even yellow here, and drag it towards the white color. So now I'm just gonna move those around to get something I like, and I think this could work. And as a final note, I'm just gonna use glow. For the glow, I'm just gonna use maybe, let's try yellow. And ramp up the intensity and glow size as well. And now we can play with the glow amount here. Okay, so I think that looks cool. I mean, ideally we probably want to go back and maybe tweak some of our subtract settings, so we can get rid of a lot of these areas here, because they are very regular. So let's see if we can actually do it. So I'm gonna go to this shape, because I think this this controls, as you see, our main size of the subtraction. And so obviously that's too much, so I'm just gonna go to levels here and try to adjust those settings a little bit. So I like what's happening here, but I really don't like what's happening on the edges. So let's see if we can, play with maybe the slope. Okay, that's pretty cool. So we need to keep samples to 1. And I think now we can make it a lot more irregular using those settings, okay? So as you can see, I think this texture could work as an impact. I think it looks pretty cool. Yeah, those edges are really bothering me, so let's see if we can, what kind of settings we can tweak. I'm gonna go back to this circle and maybe Okay. Okay, so we're basically getting rid of this edge and try to shrink down to something that's a lot more irregular, like here. So I think this works well, but let's keep tweaking. So I'm gonna go to blend maybe now, and if I will try to tweak the opacity, we kind of revealing some of the subtraction that we've taken away from that texture, and we can do the same thing for our first blend here. Okay, so if you want to maintain those edges, that play with those opacity settings, I'm going to keep it as it is. And this was one of the simple crack textures, but I wanted to start somewhere, and for the next ones we're just gonna, I think, explore a lot more complicated graphs and dive a little bit more into details. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that one, and hopefully it's going to give you some insight on how to start making your own textures. All right, thanks a lot.